All right. Welcome to class, everyone. Now, in our previous lecture, we were talking about life during the Buddha age. We had already talked about political and economic life. तो ये डिस्कस कर चुके थे. Now we need to talk about social life followed by philosophy and religion. So first, about the social aspects of life during Buddha age. Can give the heading social life. What are we going to see? Are we going to see a complete break from the later Vedic age or continuation of the later Vedic society? Primarily continuation of the later Vedic society. So write down the society of the Buddha age carried over many features of later Vedic society. Carried over many features of later Vedic society. Such as, in some points likho, the Varna based social division continued. The Varna based social division continued. Any changes seen over here? In terms of its rigidity, in terms of hierarchy, were these elements more intensified or lesser? More intensified. In full stop. In fact, it became more rigid. As the Varna based order crystallized and social mobility declined further. Full stop. Birth continued to determine the Varna of an individual. Right? Another feature of society during the Vedic age or Varna based classification of society during the Buddha age was that now ideological reinforcements of this system is going to be present as well. So write down religious works such as the Upanishads. Subpoint. Religious works such as the Upanishads and the Dharma Sutras. Religious works such as the Upanishads and Dharma Sutras, in fact, reinforced the hierarchical Varna-based division. On ideological and religious grounds. क्या नाम है आपका? आपका नाम क्या है? रोहित. You are a new admission?
No, sir. I came for a demo class.
You came for a demo class. All right. On the basis of ideological and religious grounds.
Class has not been started.
Class has already started.
So we are.
Yeah, you are the only offline students. तो क्या देखा हमने कि वर्ना बेस्ड क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी बिकेम इवन मोर रिजिड, and during the Buddha age, the religious works such as Upanishads and the Dharma Sutras were used to ideologically and religiously reinforce the Varna based classification. The Upanishads, for example, mention different kinds of marriages, two of which were on the basis of Varna classification. इनको बोलते थे अनुलोम marriages and pratilom marriages. Anulom marriages were a kind of hypergamy. Pratilom marriages were hypogamy. Difference क्या है दोनों में? Both of these are types of intervarna marriages. In Anulom type of marriages, the male belonged to a higher varna than the female. And in Pratilom marriages, ulta hota tha. The male belonged to a lower varna than the females. Right? Now, while both Anulom as well as Pratilom kind of intervarna marriages were discouraged, one of these was completely prohibited. Which one? Pratilom type of marriages were completely prohibited. So, in subpoint under this, you can write. They mention Anulom and Pratilom type marriages which were both discouraged, but Pratilom marriages were completely prohibited. Good evening. All right. कितना clear है? What would happen to the position of women in society? Yeah.
In the Pratilom marriages, does the groom have to go to the woman's house after the marriage?
No, ऐसा नहीं होगा. प्रतिलोम का मतलब ये हो गया कि man would be of a lower varna than the woman, right? So there were 4 varnas, na? Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. So if a Brahmin man wants to marry a Kshatriya woman, वो तो चल जाएगा, but if it is the opposite, वो allowed नहीं होगा, right? The marriages are going to remain patrilocal only. The family is going to remain patrilineal only. Okay? So over there, that is not going to change. The idea of matrilocalism or matrilineality is not going to be present. The society as a whole is going to remain patriarchal, but the you can say rights and privileges enjoyed by the people of the lower varnas are going to be even more restricted now. Okay? The idea of Brahmanical domination is going to be reinforced now through these kinds of rules and regulations. Right? So in such a scenario, what is going to be the impact on the position of women? Would they be relatively better off or relatively poorer? Relatively poorer. So it began declining. For example, various freedoms with regards to choice of marriage, with regards to education, etc., they would all be taken away. Women would also be legally prohibited from inheritance. So denial of inheritance is going to be there. Participation of women in economic activities would also be restricted. Participation of women in religious activities would also be restricted. So religious disabilities are going to increase. Will social evils such as sati or child marriage, etc., emerge at this point of time? No, not here. A little bit later. From the Mauryan and post-Mauryan period onwards, these kinds of evils would emerge. But other evils such as banning widow remarriage is going to be the norm. Further, the perception of the society towards women as a whole is also going to change to the disadvantage of women. Women are now going to start to be compared with social evils such as wine or gambling. Okay? So social attitudes towards women would become more negative as compared to earlier. Now, this was a trend that was moving in one direction only ever since the early Vedic age. Early Vedic age mein position of women was relatively better off. It kept on declining gradually throughout the rest of Indian history. So position of women would be even worse as compared to the position of women during the preceding period, that is the later Vedic age. That is the point over here, right? Now, at this point of time, what changes did we see in the society and in the economy and polity? We saw higher differentiation in the society, right? We also saw that the economic activities are going to explode, right? This was the period of second urbanization, and a number of new occupations would start emerging. At the same time, एक नई चीज इमर्ज होगी known as आप धर्म, right? What is this आप धर्म or अपधर्म? As a result of the craft proliferation, it was becoming more and more difficult to reinforce the Varna based rules regarding occupation. So according to the Varna Ashram Dharma system, the different Varnas should follow their own specific occupations. But because now craft proliferation was taking place, a number of new employment opportunities were emerging, people were starting to undertake tasks that were not assigned to them. Okay? So now what was the need? For greater differentiation of the society on the basis of occupation. And as a result of this new problem of apadharma, one new social category is going to be created for classification of the society, that is caste or jati. Okay? So caste or jati is going to emerge as a result of economic changes and the risk or challenge that it posed to the varnashram dharma system. Is this clear? So it was a manufactured identity, it was an invented identity. Clear hai? So at this point you can write down. The economic growth of this period resulted in the emergence of a large number of new occupations which threatened to dilute the occupation based identity of the different varnas full stop. The contemporary religious literature refers to the practice of apadharma. Religious literature refers to the practice of apadharma. Within brackets you can write taking up occupations outside the allowed ones. Okay, full stop. To overcome this challenge, same point meaning, to overcome this challenge, comma, the Brahmanical intellectuals of this period invented the concept of caste or jati. To further divide the society. Full stop. But would they be able to so easily justify the creation of this new category to divide the society, thus further removing the elites from the have-nots? उसके लिए कुछ और justification करना पड़ेगा so that they could reinforce the varnashram dharma system and the concept of purity of the varnas. So in order to explain or justify the emergence of castes, they came up with a new idea, that is varna samkar. This was the basis for the emergence of different castes or jatis. What is varna samkar? The intermixing of the varnas, right? Now intermixing of the varnas में क्या होगा? People belonging to different varnas are going to marry each other and their offspring are going to have a different jati or caste as compared to their parents. So according to them, varna samkar, the practice of varna samkar, was responsible for the emergence of castes or jatis. Okay, write down next point. Ideologically, Ideologically, this was justified. This was justified on the basis of the phenomenon of Varna Samkar. Within brackets, you can write intermixing of the Varnas. Intermixing of the Varnas. Okay? And since there are 4 Varnas, there are numerous combinations which are possible, right? One of the combinations which was the most hated, most reviled was a pratilom marriage between a Brahmin woman and a Shudra man, right? So this was the worst kind of marriage possible from the lens of the Brahmanical elite of this period. They wanted to preserve the purity of the Varnas. They did not want Brahmin women to get married to people of lower Varnas. And in order to prevent these things from happening, क्या होगा? The emergence of a new social evil, that is untouchability, right? The contemporary religious literature refers to a new category of people known as Chandals, which would be mentioned later by Fahim during the 5th century AD also. And these were described by Fahim as untouchables. How do these Brahmanical sources explain the emergence of Chandals? Simply they say that these are the impure offspring of Brahmin women and Shudra men, right? So इनके अगर बच्चे होंगे automatically they were categorized as untouchables. Okay. Next main point, write down. The concept of purity and pollution. The concept of purity and pollution was associated with the Varnas and castes. This resulted in the emergence of untouchability. Full stop. Subpoint. Example. The Dharma Sutras refer to a class of people known as Chandals, who were considered to be inherently impure, since they were the offsprings of the unholy union between Brahmin women and Shudra men. Okay, is this clear? Now, one more basis for social division which had emerged towards the end of the later Vedic age is now going to expand during the Buddha age. That is Gotra, right? During the later Vedic age, only the Brahmins divided themselves in accordance with the different Gotras. During the Mahajanpat period or the Buddha age, the concept of Gotra became popular in all the Varnas. So write down. during the Buddha age, comma, the concept of Gotra became widespread. Gotra became widespread. Full stop. It was adopted by all the Varnas. Full stop. Therefore, the position of an individual in the social hierarchy became a function of his varna, jati, and gotra. Became a function of their varna, jati, and gotra. So what are we seeing? Essentially, the basis for social classification is becoming more and more complex and more well defined. Why? Because it is the necessity for the political, economic, and social elites of this period, that is the Brahmins. They have already obtained the topmost position within society, within the economy, and within polity. Now they want to maintain the status quo. They don't want to lose their advantage, and that is why इस बेसिस पर जो डिवीजन है उसको वो और ज्यादा वेल डिफाइन करेंगे, एंड दे आर आल्सो गोइंग टू ट्राई टू रिजिडिफाई दिस सिस्टम. इज दिस क्लियर? समझ में आया इतना? ऑलराइट, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट, इज देयर गोइंग टू बी एनी रिएक्शन अगेंस्ट दिस? क्यों? बिकॉज द बुद्धा एज वाज द पीरियड ऑफ second urbanization. What are we going to see? We are going to see the emergence of some wealthy classes and some perpetually poor classes. Wealthy classes में कौन कौन आ जाएंगे? Gahapatis. Then the Sethis. And in the poorer classes, we will have people such as the Kammakars, that is the wage laborers or the craftsmen, artisans, etc. And the Dasas and Dasis. Who were the Gahapatis? The rich farmers. The Sethis were the rich merchants and bankers living in the cities. The Kammakars were the wage laborers and artisans, and Dasas were the slaves. Now, invariably, all of them came from which varnas? The upper varnas or the lower varnas? So, जो rich farmers होते थे, farming was a task of which varna? Vaishyas primarily. Merchants and bankers belonging to which varna? Once again, Vaishyas. And the majority of the Kammakars and Dasas came from Shudra Varnas. Right? Now, while the Vaishyas had registered economic success, their position within the social hierarchy was still low, right? So they enjoyed low social status. And Shudras they had neither economic well-being nor social status, right? So what are these people going to look for? A level playing field. And how are the elites going to respond? Will they grant them this higher social status and economic opportunity? No, they will try to restrict it. And this is going to lead to social conflict. Okay? So social conflict on the basis of economic and social differences is going to become a marked characteristic of the Buddha age. In fact, this is why Buddha and Mahavir, people like these, they are going to find some new ideologies. They are going to bring in some new ideologies to resolve the social conflict. Clear hai itna? Write down. The second urbanization resulted in the emergence of new groups such as the Gahapatis, Sethis, Kammakars, and Dasas who wanted greater economic opportunities and higher social status. Full stop. Naturally, their aspirations clashed with the existing Brahmanical social structure, resulting in deep social conflict. Full stop. Okay? In fact, this social conflict is not going to be limited only to the relationship between the elites and the common people. The elites being the Brahmins and Kshatriyas, and the common people being the Vaishyas and Shudras. But among the elites also it is going to result in conflict. Now, during the Buddha age, what had happened to agriculture and the economy as a whole? It had increased, right? So economic expansion had taken place at an accelerated rate. This resulted in the generation of a large surplus. Right? Now competition would emerge among the different sections of the elites with regards to who is going to appropriate the major portion of this surplus. So competition among elites with regards to ownership of the surplus is also going to intensify. And what was the basis of classification among the elites? क्या बेसिस था? जो elites हैं उनमें वो अपने आप में डिफरेंशिएशन किस बेसिस पे कर रहे थे? Once again on the basis of varna, right? I'm talking only about the elites. चाहे वो रिलीजियस एलीट हो जाए, चाहे सोशल एलीट हो जाए, चाहे पॉलिटिकल एलीट हो जाए, चाहे इकोनॉमिक एलीट हो जाए, जिनके पास सबसे ज्यादा पावर, वेल्थ, ये सब है, वो भी अपने बीच में डिफरेंशिएशन कर रहे थे ना, ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ वर्ना एंड गोत्र, राइट? सबसे ज्यादा ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ वर्ना. हाँ, क्या Varna was a type of class only. Varna was actually something.
Between those elite classes also, upper class, elite person.
अपर क्लासेस में कौन कौन आ जाएंगे लोग? ज्यादातर उनका आप वरना देखो, कौन कौन आएंगे? नहीं, ब्राह्मण्स एंड क्षत्रियाज, राइट? जो सेठीज हैं वो इकोनॉमिक एलिट्स में आएंगे. क्लास इज एक्चुअली एन इकोनॉमिक कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट, बट इट इज ऑल्सो एन इक्वली सोशल कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट. तो ब्राह्मण्स, सॉरी, वैश्यास को हम उस समय एलिट्स में नहीं गिन सकते हैं, क्योंकि ऑल्दो दे हैड इकोनॉमिक वेल्थ, दे डिड नॉट हैव सोशल रिस्पेक्टेबिलिटी. एंड these people, Sethis, Gahapatis or Kamakkars, what kinds of activities were they involved in? Production or consumption primarily? अलग अलग चीजों को प्रोड्यूस कर रहे थे. So these were the productive groups, right? And what kinds of groups were these, functionally speaking, from an economic point of view? Were they producing anything or were they mostly consuming things? Consuming. So these were consumptive groups. And what were they trying to consume? The entire surplus that the productive groups were actually producing at the ground level. So they wanted that the flow of resources should not only continue to flow from the bottom towards the top of the social hierarchy, but it should go to them and not to the other elites. Okay? So both of them were competing amongst each other for ownership of the higher surplus, that is the Brahmins versus the Kshatriyas, right? And as a result of this, what are we going to see? That many of the earliest Upanishads, such as the Chandogya Upanishad, which actually are critical of Brahmanism, they are going to be written in the Videha state. Videha state was a state that was created by the Kshatriyas. Over there, it was the Kshatriyas who were performing all the important roles of the society, right? So not only were they the ruling class, they were also the intellectual class. It is also going to result in a major Kshatriya reaction against the Brahmanical social order. So if you look at many of the social religious reformers of this period, whether it be Vardhaman Mahavir or Gautam Buddha, both of them belong to which Varna? Kshatriya Varna se aate the. So what were they challenging? The Brahmanical hierarchy, the Brahmanical orthodoxy. So this is going to result in a major Kshatriya reaction against Brahmanical orthodoxy. Once again, this is a manifestation of the social conflict that was brewing during the Buddha age. Clear? So next main point likho. The acceleration of economic growth during the Buddha age resulted in the enlargement of the surplus, full stop. Naturally, competition for appropriation of the surplus intensified, full stop. This competition manifested itself in the form of a conflict between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. Full stop. Subpoint. It is therefore subpoint लिखना, unsurprising that the earliest texts which challenged Brahmanical supremacy, such as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and the Chandogya Upanishad were composed in the Kshatriya dominated Videha state. Next subpoint. Similarly, Mahavir as well as Buddha hailed from the Kshatriya Varna. ठीक है. In fact, next point. In fact, many of the new heterodox sects which emerged during this period had an element of social protest and reform. ठीक है. So जो orthodox religion था, that was Brahmanism. In opposition to that, as many as 63 different heterodox sects are said to have emerged during the Buddha age, out of which Buddhism and Jainism were the two most well known. लेकिन इसकी तरह से 63 और भी थे. ठीक है. What did they have in common? Were they pro-Brahmanical or anti-Brahmanical? Orthodoxy के against हैं, heterodox हैं, they were anti-Brahmanical. Were they in favor of or against the idea of priestly domination of religion? Against. Were they in favor of or against the idea of rigid ritualism being a part of religious practice? Against. Would they have the same rigid and conservative attitudes towards people of the lower varnas, lower jatis and women, or would they have a softer attitude, more progressive attitude? More progressive attitude towards the lower varnas, women, slaves, etc. Would they accept all the religious and philosophical views expressed by the Brahmin scholars and intellectuals, or would they challenge them? They challenged them. So they challenged the Brahmanical philosophy and also the social structure and the varnashram dharma system. Okay, so write down a major aspect of the social life of this period was the emergence of a strong movement of social protest and reform full stop. As many as 63 heterodox sects emerged to challenge Brahmanism and the evils associated with it full stop. They rejected priestly domination and ritualism along with the varna based social order while espousing varna based social order while espousing more progressive views towards women, shudras and the slaves. Full stop. Next point, main point. Buddhism and Jainism in particular attacked the Varna based social division in the following manner. Firstly, they rejected the idea that Varna was a divine construct. They said that it was a man-made order. Okay? So they rejected Varna as a divine construct. Instead emphasizing that it was a man-made order. Construct. कि भगवान ने नहीं बनाया है वर्नास, इंसानों ने बनाया है, भगवान ने बना के नहीं भेजा है किसी को. कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट मतलब समथिंग विच हैज बीन मेड, जिसका एक फ्रेमवर्क हो, एक स्ट्रक्चर हो, तो उस चीज को हम कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट बोल देते हैं. आपने सुना होगा कि सोशल कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट फॉर एग्जांपल, राइट? तो ऐसे ही डिवाइन कॉन्स्ट्रक्ट, इट इज समथिंग दैट वाज कंस्ट्रक्टेड बाय गॉड इटसेल्फ. ये आइडिया बुद्धा, महावीर एक्सेट्रा ने रिजेक्ट कर दिया. सेकंड, they rejected the idea of birth as the basis of Varna. Instead emphasizing or instead linking it with karma or action or deeds. ठीक है? क्या मतलब हुआ इसका? The varna of an individual does not depend on which varna he is born into. Rather, it should be allocated on the basis of his deeds, his karma. Thirdly, Gautam Buddha also gave philosophical definitions of Brahmin and Chandal. How are Brahmins described by him philosophically, defined by him philosophically? That anybody who displays the quality of love, wisdom, empathy, sympathy, kindness, good-heartedness, open-mindedness, they are automatically a Brahmin. And anybody who displays qualities such as wickedness, such as anger, such as envy, these kinds of qualities, they are automatically a Chandal. Does not actually depend on the varna of an individual or their caste. Okay. Next लिखो, number 4. Buddhist sources also challenged the hierarchy of the varna system. Also challenge the hierarchy of the varna system. क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा हमें? That first of all, they would reject the concept of hierarchy itself. So they would initially argue that all the varnas were equal, right? There is no distinction between them. And on another level also this hierarchy would be challenged. Later they would claim that Brahmins were not the superior varna, rather Kshatriyas were the superior varna. Kshatriyas followed by Brahmins, followed by Vaishyas, followed by Shudras. This is the correct order according to them. Clear? So they also challenge the hierarchy of the varna system. Within subpoints you can write. Initially they rejected the concept of varna based hierarchy. Next subpoint you can write. Later they challenged. Initially they rejected the concept of varna based hierarchy. Subpoint likho. Later they challenged the supremacy of the Brahmins by claiming that Kshatriyas were the superior varna. Kshatriyas were the superior varna. Now, one more way in which they challenged the varna based social order was with regards to admission into the Buddhist Sangha or the Jain Viharas, right? क्या बोला इन्होंने, क्या बेसिस होना चाहिए? Should people from lower varnas be prohibited from joining these institutions? No, entry was open for all. So entry into the Buddhist Sangha or Jain monastic order was open to all. And further, what would entry into the Buddhist Sangha or the Jain Viharas do? Automatically the person would lose their varna, right? So admittance would result in the automatic loss of varna as well. ठीक है? So in this way, Buddhism and Jainism attacked the varna-based social division and the Brahmanic idea of Brahmanical supremacy. Now, what was their attitude towards women? Was it better in comparison to Brahmanism or the same or worse? No, it was better. So, Buddhism and Jainism adopted more progressive views with regards to women. Subpoint. First of all, women were allowed to join the Sangha or the Jain monasteries. They were also allowed to receive education. Would they be expected to remain confined to the four walls of the household, or would they be allowed to go out into the world? Go out, right? In fact, the Buddhist nuns, जो भिक्षुनीज थी, they were expected to go from village to village, house to house, and beg for charity, beg for alms, right? So women were also allowed to enter public life. Would they be prohibited from inheriting property? No, they were allowed to own and inherit property. etc. ठीक है? So on the basis of this, we can say that the views of Buddhism and Jainism with regards to women were far more progressive as compared to Brahmanism. Now एक question आता है that while we do note the presence of social protest and an agenda of reform in the different philosophical, intellectual, and social movements of this period, such as Buddhism and Jainism, do these movements actually represent a revolutionary trend or not? So, can we elevate these movements to the status of revolution or not? ये एक बड़ा क्वेश्चन आता है. रेवोल्यूशन मतलब कि पूरा का पूरा जो पुराना सिस्टम था उसको उखाड़ फेंका या फिर उखाड़ फेंकने की कोशिश करी, कंप्लीटली डिसमेंटल एंड डिस्ट्रॉय दी existing worldviews, existing philosophy, and create a new worldview, create a new social structure, new economic practices. तो पूरा ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हुआ या फिर कुछ इंक्रीमेंटल चेंजेस चाह रहे थे, स्मॉलर स्केल चेंजेस चाह रहे थे, स्मॉलर स्केल. तो it could not be categorized as a revolution because of some limitations. Limitations such as, while the Buddha admitted women into the Sangha, he was not sure about this decision himself. In fact, initially he was very reluctant, nahi admit karna chahte the. He thought that the entry of women into the Sangha would lead to the growth of corrupt practices in the Sangha. It would lead to the loss of discipline within the Sangha, because there would be competition and conflict for relations with women. इस तरह के views उनके थे, right? And once he was finally convinced by his favorite disciple Anand that women should be allowed to join the Sangha, he made a very sarcastic comment. My Sangha would have lasted 1,000 years, but now that women have joined, it is only going to last 500 years, right? इस तरह के ideas थे उनके. While he had a softer attitude towards the Shudras and Chandalas, did he actually take on the legal system of that period and fight for getting them their share of proper rights and privileges? नहीं. तो स्टेट से, सोशल हायरार्की से उन्होंने डायरेक्ट पंगा नहीं लिया, राइट? फर्दर वी कैन से दैट women के ऊपर एक और चीज, हाँ, that while women were permitted to join the Sangha, if the wife of a craftsman who was a member of any craft guild wanted to join the Sangha, she would need to take permission not only from her husband, but also from the leader of that craft guild also. So restrictions remained in place as well. Then we can say that slaves were not permitted to join, right? So social attitude towards slaves was no different as compared to the others. हाँ, कुछ reforms जरूर थे which were attractive to the people, but we cannot say that it was truly revolutionary. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. While a strong note of social protest and reform was present. Social protest and reform was present, comma, neither Buddhism nor Jainism, could be considered truly revolutionary. Full stop. सब पॉइंट लिखो. Women and Shudras were allowed entry into the Sangha. But all the prominent Buddhist monks came from which background? Brahmin and Kshatriya men. Came from Brahmin and Kshatriya men. Full stop. Next sub point. Buddha remained unsure about his decision to allow women to enter the Sangha. Allow women to enter the Sangha. Full stop. Further, see same subpoint. Further, women continued to remain completely subordinated to men. Full stop. Next subpoint. While Buddhism and Jainism exhibited a softer attitude towards Shudras and Chandalas, comma, neither actually demanded the overhauling of legal restrictions against them. Full stop. अगला सब पॉइंट. While both rejected Varna-based hierarchy, comma, they ended up creating their own hierarchy. Right? उसमें चेंज क्या था? केवल पोजीशन ऑफ क्षत्रियास को ब्राह्मण्स के ऊपर रख दिया गया था, लेकिन हायरार्किकल सिस्टम तो अभी भी रहा. राइट? सो these were the limitations which prohibited these social protest and reform movements from taking the shape of a true revolution. Take down a question. Were the intellectual and social movements of the Buddha age truly revolutionary? इसको एड्रेस कैसे करना है? In the introduction, we are going to provide the context of these social movements and intellectual movements. That is 63 heterodox sects, including Buddhism and Jainism. We are also going to briefly define their nature. They were primarily anti-Brahmanical and carried a strong note of protest to reform the society constructed by the Brahmanical system. Okay? Then what are we going to do? We are going to come to the main body. क्या देखेंगे कि किस तरह से ये एंटी ब्राह्मणिकल मूवमेंट्स अपने आप को एक्सप्रेस कर रहे थे, मैनिफेस्ट कर रहे थे. So features or qualities of these movements. So their attitude towards the varna ashram dharma system, their attitude towards the concept of untouchability, towards the lower position of women, etc. ये सब चीजें हमको डिस्कस करनी होंगी. Then you come to the next portion of your body. क्या कि were they truly revolutionary or not? So we'll need to critically analyze these features or qualities. And over here, what are we going to do? We are going to focus on the limitations of these heterodox movements when it comes to social reform and social protest. Okay? And then finally we come to the conclusion. On what note should we conclude this answer? बताइए.
That those movements were not truly.
तो आपने यहाँ पे बोल दिया, यहाँ पे क्या बोलोगे? वो नहीं करना चाहिए. देखो यहाँ पे आपके पास एक बहुत बढ़िया वे आउट है कि आप इसके फॉरवर्ड लिंकेजेस बता दो. ठीक है? दैट दे वर अनएबल टू ब्रिंग अबाउट अ ट्रू रेवोल्यूशन. उसकी वजह से इफेक्ट क्या हुआ सोसाइटी के ऊपर या हिस्ट्री के ऊपर, उस पे जाओ आप. राइट? सो फॉरवर्ड लिंकेजेस. राइट? इसमें आप कुछ पॉजिटिव एस्पेक्ट्स बता सकते हो और कुछ नेगेटिव एस्पेक्ट्स बता सकते हो. पॉजिटिव एस्पेक्ट्स में क्या बताओगे? नहीं, दैट they were able to prevent because they lacked a revolutionary spirit. Revolution हमेशा कैसे होते हैं? Bloody or bloodless? Bloody. They were able to reduce the level of social conflict. ठीक है? So lower conflict. And since they were able to attract a lot of followers, it also forced the Brahmanical system to reform itself. So it induced reform. क्लियर है? नेगेटिव में क्या बताओगे? लिमिटेशन क्या रह गया कि ट्रू रेवोल्यूशन नहीं बन के आ पाया. The ideas of the varnashram dharma system remained intact and continue to plague the Indian society even today. अर्लीस्ट अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली थी बुद्ध और महावीर को कि इसको जड़ से उठा करके अप्रूट कर दें. दे वर नॉट विलिंग टू डू दैट. हाँ जी. ये वाला नेगेटिव वाला देखो, वो जो वर्ण आश्रम धर्मा सिस्टम जो कि लेटर वैदिक एज में जिसकी नींव पड़ी थी और जो कि बुद्धा एज में और ज्यादा क्रिस्टलाइज हो गया, दैट बिकेम अ परमानेंट बेसिस फॉर द क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ इंडियन सोसाइटी ना. तो बुद्धा महावीर आकर के चले गए, जो वैदिक एज के पोस्ट वैदिक एज के ब्राह्मणिकल स्कॉलर्स थे वो भी आकर के चले गए, लेकिन ये जो वर्ण व्यवस्था है इसको टस से मस नहीं कर पाए. दैट इज द पॉइंट एंड दैट कंटिन्यूज टू प्लेग. इट इज अ डिजीज ऑफ द प्रेजेंट डे इंडियन सोसाइटी इवन टुडे. ठीक है. So, unable to uproot the varna and caste based divisions. ठीक है. तो इसके शॉर्ट मीडियम एंड लॉन्ग टर्म के फॉरवर्ड लिंकेजेस को आप हाईलाइट करके इसको कंक्लूड कर सकते हो. क्लियर है? इतनी बात समझ में आई है? ठीक है. टेक डाउन अनदर क्वेश्चन. फाइटिंग करना और रूल करना. देखो डोमिनेंट कौन? क्षत्रियाज? ब्राह्मण्स हुए ना. क्यों? देखो ताज तो हो सकता है किसी क्षत्रिय के सर पर होगा, लेकिन जिस संदूक में ताज को रखा जाता था उसकी चाबी किसके पास थी? वो ब्राह्मण्स के पास. क्यों बोल रहा हूं मैं ऐसा? क्योंकि वो कभी भी किसी भी रूलर को ये बोल सकते थे कि ये अधर्मी है, ही शुड बी ओवरथ्रोन. तो क्षत्रिय जो किंग्स होते थे, प्रिंसेस होते थे, उनको रिलीजियस लेजिटिमेसी, रिलीजियस बैकिंग देने वाला जो बंदा है वही एक्चुअल किंग मेकर है. पावर उसी के पास है. एंड देयरफॉर एक फिनोमिनन इमर्ज हुआ नोन एज द प्रीस्ट प्रिंस नेक्सस. नेक्सस का मतलब समझते हो ना? कोलिशन, कोलैबोरेशन, दोनों में मेल जोल हो गया. राइट. तो प्रीस्ट और प्रिंस में नेक्सस अगर इमर्ज होगा तो रिलेशनशिप इज गोइंग टू बी बोथ सिम्बायोटिक एज वेल एज कॉम्पिटिटिव इन नेचर. प्रिंस को क्या चाहिए? दी राइट टू रूल. हाउ कैन ही क्लेम द राइट टू रूल? अलग अलग सोर्सेस हो सकते हैं. एक तो रॉ पावर, ठीक है, मिलिट्री फोर्स के बेसिस पर. दूसरा बेसिस क्या हो सकता है? पॉपुलर सपोर्ट, द लव ऑफ द पीपल. अब ये दोनों चीजें बहुत कम किंग्स के पास क्वालिटीज होती हैं कि वो ऑब्टेन कर सकें. राइट. तो इजियर जॉब वुड बी टू मेक द पीपल बिलीव कि भगवान ने चुना हुआ है इनको. ठीक है, राजा साहब को अगर इनके अगेंस्ट विद्रोह हुआ तो यू विल बी रिबेलिंग अगेंस्ट गॉड हिमसेल्फ. और वो किसके पास अथॉरिटी होती है ये टैग देने का? प्रीस्ट के पास. सो ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ रिलीजन और क्या चीज? कौन? एक मिनट दोबारा क्वेश्चन देखने दो. वर द इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड सोशल मूवमेंट्स ऑफ द बुद्धा एज ट्रूली रेवोल्यूशनरी? तो वही इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड सोशल मूवमेंट्स जो मूवमेंट्स इमर्ज हुए, फंक्शनली वो क्या कर रहे थे? सोसाइटी को रिफॉर्म करने की बात कर रहे थे, कोशिश कर रहे थे. राइट. दे वर चैलेंजिंग द सोशल ऑर्डर क्रिएटेड बाय द ब्राह्मणिकल ऑर्थोडॉक्सी. लेकिन चैलेंज का बेसिस क्या था? वर दे सिंपली गोइंग फ्रॉम डोर टू डोर एंड एजुकेटिंग द पीपल कि नहीं वर्ना बेस्ड डिवीजन अच्छा नहीं है? नो, दे वर चैलेंजिंग द सोशल ऑर्डर ऑन एन इंटेलेक्चुअल और आइडियोलॉजिकल बेसिस. कि जो बेसिस है जो ब्राह्मण्स क्लेम कर रहे हैं कि वर्ना ऑर्डर इज गॉड, मेड बाय गॉड, डिवाइन ओरिजिन है उसका, वही गलत है. भगवान ने ऐसा नहीं किया है, ऑल दीज आर आर्टिफिशियल मैन मेड डिविजन्स। तो इंटेलेक्चुअल बेसिस पे उनको क्लेम कर रहे थे। व्हेन वी आर सेइंग इंटेलेक्चुअल एंड सोशल मूवमेंट्स, वी मीन दीज 63 हेटेरोडॉक्स सेक्ट्स जितने भी हैं, मतलब हाँ तो वो तो आएगा ही ना। तो बुद्धिज्म फॉर एग्जाम्पल या फिर जैनिज्म, ऑल ऑफ दीज वर रिनंसिएंट फेथ्स। तो यानी कि आपको पहले सब कुछ त्याग करना पड़ेगा, you'll have to become a bhikshu or bhikshuni, and they have to go from door to door, visit place to place, begging for food, begging for clothes, these kinds of things, right? जो मिलेगा आपको वो लोगे। अब कोई आपको दे रहा है तो you'll also have to give something in return। क्या दोगे? You will try to convert them, you will try to make them part of your own community, right? So that is what was going on. They were intellectual as well as social movements. पॉपुलर रीच भी था और इंटेलेक्चुअल चैलेंज भी कर रहे थे ब्राह्मण्स को। हाँ, कमिंग टू दिस, ये जो राइट टू रूल है, इट एक्चुअली ओरिजिनेट्स फ्रॉम द प्रीस्टली क्लास बिकॉज दे आर एबल टू प्रोवाइड आइडियोलॉजिकल जस्टिफिकेशन। प्रिंसेस के पास क्या है? दे कंट्रोल द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन। पूरा का पूरा सरप्लस जो है चैनलाइज हो रहा है टुवर्ड्स द सेंटर, टुवर्ड्स द टॉप। पोर्शन ऑफ दिस दे आर गोइंग टू गिव टू दी प्रीस्टली क्लास। जो मोर एम्बिशियस प्रीस्ट होंगे वो क्या बोलेंगे? आई डोंट सिंपली वांट अ पोर्शन ऑफ द सरप्लस, आई आल्सो वांट अ पोर्शन ऑफ द पावर दैट यू हैव, राइट? सो आप चलो मान लो प्रिंस हो, यू आर द किंग, बट आई वांट टू बी द मिनिस्टर, आई वांट टू बी द वजीर, ठीक है? तो ये वाला रिलेशनशिप अब इमर्ज हो जाएगा। ना एक और क्वेश्चन लिखो, डिस्कस the role of social conflict in inducing the intellectual fervor of the Buddha age। 15 नंबर, 200 वर्ड्स। What is the demand of the question? We have to interlink the social conflict of the Buddha age with all the intellectual activity that was going on at this point of time, ठीक है? तो ये कैसे होगा? In the introduction, what can we do? किसके बारे में बताना चाहिए? इसके बारे में या इसके बारे में पहले बताना चाहिए? पहले सोशल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के बारे में। देखो, प्लान करो कि आप अभी यहाँ पे ये लिख रहे हो, तो नेक्स्ट क्या लिखोगे? कंक्लूड किस बेसिस पे करोगे, किस पॉइंट पे करोगे? पहले इसके बारे में बात करनी चाहिए, ठीक है? इसके बारे में एक ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन दे दोगे, फिर उसके बाद नेक्स्ट स्टेप आपका क्या हो सकता है कि इस प्रोसेस के पीछे क्या फोर्सेस रिस्पॉन्सिबल थी। तो हमें क्लोजर ऑब्जर्वेशन के बाद पता लगता है कि ये फोर्सेस रिस्पॉन्सिबल थी। इंटेलेक्ट तो वही बात है ना कि आप जो मुद्दा है उस पर बहुत बाद में पहुंचोगे, आपको शुरुआत से ही उसको अटैक करना जरूरी हो जाता है ना, कि जो डिमांड है वहां से आपको डिविएट नहीं करना है। तो आपने 80% आंसर कर दिया, फिर उसके बाद लिखा कि इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ दीज, कि भाई वहां तक पहुंचेगा नहीं एग्जामिनर, ठीक है? तो थोड़ी स्ट्रेटेजाइज करना ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है। तो शुरुआत में हम क्या बात कर सकते हैं कि दिस वॉज एन एज ऑफ रिमार्केबल transformations, and among these the most remarkable was the bright intellectual activity which was expressed in the form of the emergence of 63 heterodox doctrines, out of which Buddhism and Jainism were the most influential. ठीक है? Now, अब क्या करोगे? The emergence of or the presence of such a high volume of or the concentration of such a high volume of intellectual movements in so short a time is a surprising. So we express surprise over here. Right? But the closer observation of the material facts helps us demystify this process. So unravel कर सकते हैं इसके बेसिस पर. You can unravel it with closer observation. Then you come to the main body of your answer. What should be our task over here? To link this with this. ठीक है? तो इसके लिए हमने फाउंडेशन तो लेकर दिया है, अब केवल उसको इमारत बनानी है उसके ऊपर. राइट? तो कैसे करोगे? The social conflict of this period was a result of the economic changes. The effect of these economic changes was to increase the size of the surplus as well as economic inequality. ठीक है? पहले तीर कौन चलाएगा इस इक्वेशन में? जो विनर्स हैं या लूजर्स हैं? जो विनर्स हैं वो विनर्स इसीलिए हैं कि वो पहले रिएक्ट करते हैं चीजों को. राइट? सो the pressures and opportunities induced by these changes led to the rigidification and crystallization of the social and economic hierarchy, which was codified in works such as the Upanishads and the Dharma Sutras. कुछ एग्जाम्पल्स आप ले सकते हो कि जैसे कि अनुलोम प्रतिलोम मैरिजेस को डिफाइन कर दिया गया, restrictions with regards to intermarriages were increased, the concept of untouchability etc also emerged. Right? And then इसके बाद क्या होगा? This is going to produce a counter reaction, and counter reaction किसका शेप लेगा? इन इंटेलेक्चुअल मूवमेंट्स का. राइट? केवल ये मेंशन करने से काम नहीं चलेगा. यू ऑल्सो हैव टू प्रोवाइड इन अ फ्यू पॉइंट्स some important details about the characteristics of these movements. ये एंटी ब्राह्मणिकल थे, यूजुअली क्षत्रिय लेड हुआ करते थे, दे वर मोर प्रोग्रेसिव विद रिगार्ड्स टू देयर एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स द विमेन, शूद्रास, चांडालास, अनटचेबल्स एटसेट्रा. ये सारे फीचर्स आपको बताने पड़ेंगे. एंड देन यू कम टू द कंक्लूजन. किस नोट पे कंक्लूड कर सकते हैं अब इसको? यहाँ तक का तो सफर करवा दिया मैंने, आगे का तुम बताओ.
आप ही बता दो.
नहीं देखो, लॉजिकली अभी तक सही लग रहा है ना, अब आपको यही धागा आगे खींच के ले जाना है बस। जरूरी है उसको यहाँ पे मेंशन करना? लिमिटेशन नहीं, आपने जो अभी तक आंसर लिखा है उसमें फिट बैठेगा? नहीं बैठेगा ना, तो आपको वही चीज करनी है जो ऐसा लगे कि हाँ उसी नैरेटिव का पार्ट, उसी फ्लो का पार्ट है, धारा वही वाली है, चेंज नहीं हो रहा है, और जो क्वेश्चन के डिमांड्स हैं उससे बियॉन्ड भी नहीं जा रहा है। बताओ कैसे होगा जी इसका कंक्लूजन? यहां तक की कहानी समझ में आ गई है ना, कैसे कैसे करना है? अब यहाँ पे आपने एंड कहाँ किया है? कैरेक्टरिस्टिक को मेंशन करके, राइट? उसके आगे क्या कर सकते हो आप? कुछ जनरलाइजेशन कर सकते हो कि भाई दुनिया में जब जब जुल्म बढ़ता है तो कौन आता है? शक्तिमान आता है, राइट? तो उस जमाने के शक्तिमान कौन थे? बुद्धा, महावीर और ये बाकी के जितने भी इंटेलेक्चुअल्स हैं, जो कि उस जुल्म की मशीनरी है, जो एक्सप्लॉयटेशन की मशीनरी है, उसको चैलेंज करने के लिए आए हैं, राइट? एंड ये पैटर्न आप हिस्ट्री में बार बार रिपीट होते हुए देखोगे। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ऑर्थोडॉक्स इस्लाम को चैलेंज करने के लिए कौन आएगा? सूफिज्म। ब्राह्मणिकल रिचुअलिज्म एंड डोमिनेशन को चैलेंज करने के लिए क्या आएगा? भक्ति मूवमेंट आएगा। ब्रिटिश रूल को चैलेंज करने के लिए क्या आएगा? नेशनल मूवमेंट आएगा। सो ये रिएक्शन, काउंटर रिएक्शन, रेवोल्यूशन एंड काउंटर रेवोल्यूशन, this is the actual machinery through which history itself gets developed. So in the context of the Buddha age, अगर ये बहुत ज्यादा इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्टिविटी हो रही है, is this an actually surprising development or is it an expected development? एक्सपेक्टेड डेवलपमेंट है, तो आपको यहाँ पे यही लिखना होगा, ठीक है? तो thus on the basis of this analysis it becomes clear that the intellectual outpouring of the Buddha age was in fact not surprising at all. Instead, it was a natural and expected development. ठीक है, हो गया कंक्लूजन? उस पर रिबन लग गया आपके तोहफे के ऊपर? गुड। तो इस तरह से इस क्वेश्चन को आप एड्रेस कर सकते हो। देखो भाई, कर सकते हो, नंबर नहीं मिलेंगे आपको उतने भाई, वो तो हर बंदा करेगा ना। बाकी जो सब्जेक्ट है उनमें वे फॉरवर्ड लिख सकते हैं, इसमें वो बहुत खराब स्ट्रैटेजी होती है, वो अपने नंबर काटने की स्ट्रैटेजी होती है कि आप वे फॉरवर्ड लिख के आगे बढ़ जाओ। एक्चुअली होता क्या है ना कि फॉरवर्ड के बाद कंक्लूजन, लेकिन हिस्ट्री में तो फॉरवर्ड नहीं हो सकते, क्योंकि वो तो नहीं, वे फॉरवर्ड भी बहुत कम केसेस में आपका काम करेगा। इट इज गोइंग टू डिपेंड ऑन द डिमांड्स ऑफ द क्वेश्चन कि आप भाई कैसे कंक्लूड कर रहे हो आंसर को। वो वन साइज फिट्स ऑल अप्रोच ना एक लेजी अप्रोच होती है कि मान लो जो आपको समझा रहा है, पढ़ा रहा है, उसने हो सकता हो उतना नहीं काम किया हो इसके ऊपर, तो उसको आइडिया नहीं लग रहा है। क्योंकि भाई अगर इस तरह से आप करने बैठोगे एक क्वेश्चन को, तो एनालिसिस उसका बहुत ज्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो जाता है। लेकिन अगर आप ये नहीं कर रहे हो ना, तो देन यू आर डूइंग योर सेल्फ अ डिससर्विस। क्लासरूम में तो मान लो ठीक है, कोई भी आपको जैसे भी पढ़ा दे आप उसको ऑब्जॉर्व करके ले जाते हो, लेकिन घर जाने के बाद जब एनालाइज करोगे, दूसरे लोगों से कंपेयर करोगे, तब आपको क्लियर होता है कि यार ये प्रॉब्ली तरीका मेरा सही नहीं है। आपको हर क्वेश्चन के लिए एक फ्लेक्सिबल अप्रोच रखनी होगी। आपको पहले आइडेंटिफाई करना है भाई एग्जैक्ट डिमांड क्या है क्वेश्चन का, मैं उसको कैसे एड्रेस कर सकता हूँ, किस ऑर्डर में मुझे अपने पॉइंट्स को या फिर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स को अरेंज करना है, क्या चीजें मुझे मेंशन करनी है, क्योंकि पता तो आपको बहुत सारा होगा, लिखनी उसमें से लिमिटेड चीजें होंगी, और इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन मुझे किस नोट पे करने हैं। दीज आर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट्स ऑफ एनी गुड आंसर। और कोई भी ऐसा दो क्वेश्चन नहीं होंगे जिनका आंसर एकदम सेम होगा। सिमिलर हो सकता है, एकदम सेम नहीं होगा, ठीक है? अनटिल अनलेस बोथ की वर्डिंग, दोनों क्वेश्चंस की वर्डिंग बना करके बदल करके सेम मीनिंग निकाल रहे हैं, अनटिल अनलेस दैट इज द केस, कोई भी दो आंसर सेम नहीं हो सकते हैं आपके। क्लियर? तो वे फॉरवर्ड वाली जो स्ट्रैटेजी है वो हो सकता है कि 10% ऑफ द आंसर्स के लिए कारगर हो, लेकिन हर एक आंसर के लिए कारगर नहीं होगी, चाहे वो हिस्ट्री हो चाहे कोई और सब्जेक्ट हो।
नहीं, मैं वही कह रहा था, मैं वे फॉरवर्ड नहीं लिखने के बारे में कह रहा था। तो मतलब कंक्लूजन मेजरली कैसे लिखा जाता है हिस्ट्री?
अब वो कैसे लिखा जाता है, तो देखो जैसे हमने यहाँ पे बात करी, पहले वाला जो क्वेश्चन था इसमें बात करी, तो इसमें हमने फॉरवर्ड लिंकेजेस के ऊपर एंड किया है। यहाँ पे हमने क्या किया है कि जनरलाइजेशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री एज अ डिसिप्लिन कर दिया है, कि भाई हिस्टोरिकल प्रोसेस ऑफ चेंज काम कैसे करता है, उससे हमने इसको लिंक कर दिया है, राइट? तो दैट इज गोइंग टू बी डिफरेंट फॉर एवरी क्वेश्चन, एंड इट इज ऑल्सो गोइंग टू बी डिपेंडिंग ऑन हाउ यू हैव क्राफ्टेड द आंसर दैट फार। जब आप कंक्लूजन लिखने की स्टेज पे पहुंचे हो तो आपने उसके पहले क्या क्या चीजों के बारे में मेंशन किया है, इमीडिएटली पहले किस चीज के बारे में बात करी है, आपका जो वेट ऑफ आर्ग्यूमेंट्स है वो किस तरफ जा रहा है, ये भी तो भाई उसका भी तो मायने रहेगा। तो कोई एक ऐसा तरीका नहीं है कि मैं आपको बता दूं कि ये 5 या 6 तरीके होते हैं कंक्लूड करने के किसी भी आंसर को, तो वो नहीं होता है, वो विद प्रैक्टिस आएगा आपको। हाँ, वो हर क्वेश्चन के पर्सपेक्टिव में भी अलग होगा, प्लस जिस तरह के आप आंसर राइटिंग कर रहे हो ना, उससे भी आप अपना एक मेथड डेवलप करोगे, तो यू विल बी एबल टू। और वो मैं तो जैसे यहाँ पे बता रहा हूँ, प्रॉबेबली आप लोग 1 घंटे बैठ के सोचो तो एकदम सेम तो नहीं आता, कुछ तो अलग आता, राइट? मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ उससे खराब आता है उससे बेहतर आता, एकदम सेम आना थोड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है। इट इज ऑल्सो गोइंग टू डिपेंड ऑन द वे इन विच यू आर थिंकिंग अबाउट दिस सब्जेक्ट, ठीक है? आपका डेप्थ ऑफ नॉलेज किस लेवल का है अभी, तो एज जैसे जैसे डेप्थ ऑफ नॉलेज अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ सब्जेक्ट बढ़ता जाएगा, वैसे वैसे क्वालिटी ऑफ आंसर इज ऑल्सो गोइंग टू कीप चेंजिंग।
ये सर 3 पार्ट होते हैं, इंट्रो, बॉडी और कंक्लूजन।
मेजर यही होते हैं। अब वो डिपेंड करेगा कि बॉडी में कितने पार्ट हैं।
बॉडी में तो 2-3 हो सकते हैं।
बॉडी में कितने भी हो सकते हैं, हो सकता है एक ही पार्ट हो सकता है 2 पार्ट हो सकता है 4 पार्ट हो।
बॉडी में भी एक तो हो गया, उसका इंट्रोडक्शन हो गया, वो थोड़ा सा और ब्रीफ हो
नहीं
गया।
नहीं, वो डिपेंड करेगा ना, मान लो डिबेट वाला क्वेश्चन आ गया और 6-7 हिस्टोरियंस ने अलग अलग चीजें बोली हैं, तो अब भाई 6-7 तो पॉइंट्स हो गए, उसमें पार्ट्स हो गए, राइट? तो इस तरह से अलग अलग चीजें आएंगी, वो जैसे जैसे आप नए क्वेश्चंस मिलते जाएंगे ना, वैसे वैसे समझ में आता जाएगा। हाँ, तो हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं लाइफ इन द बुद्धा एज। हमने क्या क्या डिस्कस कर लिया है? पॉलिटी डिस्कस हो गया, इकोनॉमी डिस्कस हो गया, सोसाइटी डिस्कस हो गया, अब क्या डिस्कस करना है? रिलीजन एंड फिलोसफी। व्हाट डू वी सी? इस एरिया में ड्यूरिंग द बुद्धा एज बहुत ही ज्यादा काम होगा एज कंपेयर टू एनी अदर एज इन इंडियन हिस्ट्री। सबसे ज्यादा एक्टिविटी हमें इस पीरियड में देखने के लिए मिलेगी, इन द फॉर्म ऑफ द इमर्जेंस ऑफ उपनिषदिक थॉट। While the earliest Upanishads were composed during the late Vedic age, towards the end of the late Vedic age, the bulk of the Upanishads were actually composed during the Buddha age, during the Mahajanpad period. The emergence of Buddhism, the emergence of Jainism, the emergence of a Jivika sect, the emergence of the Charvak philosophy, etc., along with the thank you, along with the emergence of several other heterodox sects and doctrines, ठीक है? क्वेश्चन इमर्ज होता है कि what was so special about this period that such a large amount of intellectual, philosophical and religious developments took place? बताइए, क्यों इमर्ज होगा, क्यों चेंज होगा इस पीरियड में? There can be economic factors, social factors, as well as political factors. इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स में क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा हमें? That this was the period of second urbanization that was characterized by the growth of the economy, as well as the growth of economic inequality. This was contributing to a high degree of competition and conflict within the society. Therefore, some solutions were necessary. So all these different religious doctrines and philosophies tried to offer their own set of solutions for this. Further, we see that the existing religion and philosophy was not suited to addressing this conflict, addressing these problems. In fact, उसकी वजह से कुछ problems हो रहे थे. With respect to the economy, Brahmanism had certain limitations. First of all, it emphasized upon dan and dakshina. It depended upon creating a gift economy which was patently irrational. Market economy में कैसा allocation होना चाहिए resources का? A rational allocation of resources should take place. So it was having an irrational basis for exchange. That is exchange of gifts, dan and dakshina. Further, it also prohibited usury, right? That is money lending, which was also contributing to loss of economic opportunities. And further, it also emphasized on cattle slaughter. And whose economic interest was cattle slaughter harming the most? The farmers. They needed their animal power for success, and that is why Brahmanism's limitations also acted as a push factor towards attracting the people in favor of these heterodox sects, since they were able to offer better solutions to the economic problems. They provided practical solutions to these problems. Society में क्या problem था? What do we see? The reduction of social mobility, the rising restrictions on women, Shudras, Chandalas, and slaves, the reinforcement of Brahmanical supremacy, and the enlargement or rising complexity of rules regarding social interactions. Further, due to the expansion of second urbanization, one particular group had done very well economically. Who was that? The Vaishyas. They had emerged as large Gahapatis and Sethis. Right? So Vaishyas wealth had increased, but their social status had remained stagnant, or in some ways had even declined. Right? They wanted to correct this equation, to correct this mismatch. Okay? Was any of this possible within Brahmanism? No. Therefore, as a result of this, everybody was looking for an alternative. Okay? Further, politically speaking, this was the Mahajanpad age. Characterized by frequent territorial wars. This resulted in loss of both life as well as property. It was also harmful for political stability. Therefore, both the people as well as the state, the bankers, traders, craftsmen, and farmers all wanted a higher degree of non-violence, or they wanted freedom from perpetual violence. And who was emphasizing upon it? On non-violence, ahimsa, Brahmanism or Buddhism? Buddhism and Jainism. Okay? So they were offered by Buddhism and Jainism. Okay? Now, take down a question. Discuss the factors responsible for the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism. Full stop. $200 words, 15 marks. Right. इंट्रोडक्शन में हम क्या बात कर सकते हैं? That the period between 600 to 300 BCE witnessed unprecedented intellectual activity across the world. For example, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and Homer made grand contributions to Greek philosophy, education, and culture. This was also the age of Zarathustra, in Persia, and the age of Confucius and Lao Tzu. कहाँ पर? In China. Confucius and Lao Tzu are the names of two famous Chinese scholars. ठीक है? Zarathustra in Persian. He is also a scholar. Scholar and philosopher. तो ग्रीस में भी, पर्शिया में भी, चाइना में भी a great degree of intellectual activity is going on. यही है, intellectual activity across the world. You may mention, you don't need to necessarily mention all these names. एक दो भी mention कर सकते हो, हाँ, लेकिन ये बोलो कि यहाँ पे भी similar movements चल रहे थे. But among them, among all of them, the most remarkable were the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism. Then you come to the main body of your answer. यहाँ पे क्या लिखना है? They emerged as the result of a complex interplay of social, economic, and political factors. Economic, social, and political factors. Economically, socially, and politically, the Mahajanpat period was a period of great upheaval and uncertainty and conflict. The existing religious and philosophical doctrines were inadequate for addressing this crisis. In fact, Brahmanism itself was the source of many of these crises. Right? and thus the popularity of Brahmanism was at an all-time low. ठीक है? So intellectually there existed a powerful vacuum. And vacuum को fill करने के लिए as many as 63 heterodox sects emerged, out of which Buddhism and Jainism were the most successful. ठीक है? And then conclusion. किस नोट पर? बताओ. जो लिमिटेशन है बुद्धिज्म जैनिज्म के, तो वो आप यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी बता चुके हो, राइट? व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द इनएडिक्वेसी ऑफ ब्राह्मणिज्म और ब्राह्मणिज्म इटसेल्फ कॉजिंग दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, इन फैक्ट ओवर हियर यू आर हाईलाइटिंग जो ये पूरा रिलेशनशिप है बिटवीन दीज सोशल, इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स, दैट इज व्हाट यू आर डूइंग ओवर हियर. ठीक, तो ये ऑलरेडी आप बता चुके हो. बताइए कंक्लूजन क्या होना चाहिए ऐसे में? अरे भाई आपने एक बात कर दी कि क्यों प्रोसेस, मतलब व्हाई डिड दिस प्रोसेस टेक प्लेस. दूसरी बात क्या कर सकते हो, इसका इम्पैक्ट क्या पड़ा, राइट? सो यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द सिग्निफिकेंस और impact of the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism. ठीक, यहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा नहीं लिखना है. You can simply write it was a watershed development in Indian history and permanently altered the course of Indian religion, philosophy, art, culture and even political ideas. ठीक है, तो ये आप यहाँ पे बोल सकते हो सिग्निफिकेंस या इम्पैक्ट में. क्लियर? इसको डिक्टेट करवाने की जरूरत है क्या? नहीं, हो जाएगा, बिकॉज ऑल दीज आर थिंग्स दैट वी हैव ऑलरेडी सीन जब से हमने महाजनपद पीरियड पढ़ना शुरू किया है. तो आई डोंट थिंक इसको अलग से डिक्टेट करवाने की जरूरत पड़ेगी. नाउ नेक्स्ट टास्क वी हैव टू डू व्हेन इट कम्स टू रिलीजन एंड फिलॉसफी इज talk about the different philosophical systems of this period, that is Buddhism, Jainism and the Upanishadic thought. ठीक है? Then there is also a debate in history that Buddha was not actually an original thinker, rather he simply borrowed the Upanishadic thought and repackaged it in a new way, right? Over here our task is going to be to underline the similarities between the Upanishadic thought and Buddhism and the डिसिमिलैरिटीज। ठीक है, तो ये हमको 4 चीजें करनी है और बची हुई है हमारी रिलीजन एंड फिलॉसफी में। दिस वी आर गोइंग टू डू इन टुमारोज लेक्चर। ठीक है, आई एम एंडिंग दिस लेक्चर फॉर नाउ। इफ यू हैव एनी डाउट्स प्लीज लेट मी नो। नहीं, जो डिस्कस किया समझ में आया है सोसाइटी और रिलीजन का अभी तक? चलिए ठीक है। हाँ, संघ के हमेशा लीडर्स कौन होंगे? मेल्स ही होंगे। हु आर गोइंग टू टेक ऑल द इम्पोर्टेंट डिसीजंस? मेल्स। हु इज गोइंग टू रेगुलेट द एंट्री ऑफ पर्सन्स इनटू द संघ? Males. Who is going to control all the assets of the sangha? Males. Who is going to decide what kind of tasks should be allocated to different people within the sangha? Males होंगे। Who is going to hold an audience with the important administrators, ministers or even kings? Males. जितने भी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हैं ये कौन करेगा? मेल्स करेंगे। तो विमेन थी तो, लेकिन उनका रोल सबसर्विएंट था, राइट? तो दे डिड नॉट एंजॉय मच अथॉरिटी विद इन द संघ। क्लियर है? दैट इज द पॉइंट। तो एक्चुअल रिस्ट्रिक्शंस नहीं थे ऑन वुमेन, लेकिन जो रिस्ट्रिक्टेड सोसाइटी था उसका रिफ्लेक्शन संघा में भी जरूर दिखता था। ठीक है, चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम। आई विल सी यू गाइस टुमारो।